Welcome back to the ETF Inspector. It's Thursday, November 6th, a little bit before 7 o'clock at night, and this is our daily recap video for the three weekly paying YieldMax funds that we cover: ULTY, the Ultra Option Income Strategy Fund; LFGY, the Crypto Industry Portfolio Option Income Fund; and SLTY, the Ultra Short Option Income Fund. Reminder, if you don't already, please follow me on X at ETF_Inspector1. I'll let you know when videos are coming out and all things related to ETFs that I cover. All right, just like Tuesday, it was another bloodbath, maybe worse. ULTY down 3.4% on the day. We can just see it. Everything's red. Not lucid, though. LFGY, even worse, over 5% drop in a day. That's ugly. And then if everything's down, SLTY's going to have a good day, but not even that good. So how much the market went down, SLTY should have been up the opposite direction. But since most of their sold puts were in the money, they were not really able to capture much of anything, only going up about 0.8%. We'll look at all the individuals on our spreadsheets in just a minute. All right, we'll start with ULTY. We went from the ULTY underdogs. I like the new name now, ULTY Anonymous, or some people call it Culty. I'm not quite there yet. All right, when we look at the trades, if you've been around, this one's familiar. We bought back into Oklo, or as Rod would say, Oklo. So bought 500,000 shares of Oklo. If you've noticed on the thumbnail, we sold our shares of Bitmine Immersion and Rigetti. So the active managers are busy at work. All right, now we got into a lot of our, it's Thursday, so we generally see about half of the fund get rolled over to the next week, and so that's going to be the case here, except for starting off Bitmine. This is just closing everything out because we sold the shares, and so we're not selling. You see no SS, sell short, to open a new position. But we brought in 3.7 million just on the closeout. That's because those protective puts had a ton of value, over 6 million just in those, to help pay for all the closeout and leave some left over. Coinbase closing and rolling. Again, it only cost 44,000 to close out the sold calls, and our protective puts brought in 1.5 million. Then we're selling for the next week, bringing in a nice chunk, $2.8 million credit. CoreWeave, this is going to be the same story every time, right? Buying to close out, generally cheap, but this is buying to close those sold puts. So the share price dropped so far that not only did the protective puts go into the money, but even the sold puts further down went into the money as well. So they ate up a good chunk of the money from the protective puts, but there was still some left over. All in all, after selling for next week, brought in 2.7 million. Hims and Hers brought in almost $2.5 million credit. Again, rolling to next week, paying pennies to close out, collecting dollars on the protective puts, and then selling the new. Not getting a ton of money on them, but this isn't bad. Selling puts for 18 and 32 cents to help offset the protective put costs of 55 and 64 cents. That's taking away a decent chunk of them. Robinhood, $8.2 million credit on the roll. As you can see, a large chunk of that, almost $6 million of that came from the protective puts. Oklo, we just bought the shares, so we're going to start our collar strategy, but this is kind of the advanced collar strategy. So we're buying our protective puts, we're selling our calls to generate income, but we're also selling puts further down to help pay for the protective puts. So they're another $15 below our protection. So it'd have to lose over 20% in a week in order to lose that trade. But it brought in 1.3 million. Rigetti, this is just closing everything out. As you can see, no SS. We're not selling short any new to open. So we're paying change to close things out. We even had a call purchased on the high side, like of a spread. But then at the end, selling the puts is what brought in the income, 1.9 million. Rocket Lab closing and rolling to next week brought in 6.7 million. You can see 5.6 of that's from a protective put. And Symbotic, closing and rolling the next week, brought in 4.3 million, with the large chunk of that coming from protective puts as well. So ugly days are going to happen. I would rather be in a fund like this that has all that protection, because if it didn't, if you were in some of the competitors that do a similar strategy without protective puts, you'd be down the full amount that everything went down. So on the trading day, they brought in $34 million. So they are positive options trading wise, but that really doesn't help when you're down $300 million worth of value in your shares. All right, when we switch over to the other page for our holdings, we've got our weighted move. So if you had basically equally purchased shares of the underlyings only, your portfolio would have dropped 8.8%, as opposed to if you were in ULTY, where your portfolio dropped. Now that says 3.09, and that's not a formula. That's just reporting on the percentage change. I thought that it said greater than that, 3.40, 454. This just hasn't finished updating. Excel sometimes takes a little while to finish those pennies out. But either way, down 3.4% instead of 8.8. So it saved us more than half of a large bit more than half of the loss we would have taken. Affirm Holdings down. That doesn't look so lucky. 7.77%. Calls expiring tomorrow at 74, still 12% out. We sold all our shares of Bitmine Immersion. We're not in there anymore. 167 million in cash, 307 million in government obligation funds for $475-ish million. Cypher down over 12%. They do still have calls expiring tomorrow at 25.50. They're 17% out. They've got calls sold for next week as well at 27. They're 24% out. Coinbase down 7.5%. The remaining positions for this week have now been closed and rolled. They do have calls sold next week for 330, as well as puts sold at 265. So the 330 calls are 11.7% out. They've also got a put spread sold, selling the 310s. They're actually in the money by 5%. So they're going to be expensive to close out if that doesn't get turned around. CoreWeave down 6.5%. Everything left for this week got rolled. There is already 120s for next week, 12.2% out of the money. Galaxy Digital down 3.37%. They are already rolled till next week. It's a put spread. There's no shares owned, and they're 1.2% out of the money. Hims and Hers was down 5% today. Calls at 48 are still in play for tomorrow, 15% out of the money. Everything else sold-wise got rolled. Obviously, the associated protective puts are still there with them as well. And they're in the money, so that's going to be more of a credit to close out tomorrow. Robinhood down 10.8%, everything rolled. Iron down 12.3%. There's calls sold still expiring tomorrow, 76 and 78. They're 13.5% and 16.5% out of the money. Lucid Group, the big winner, maybe the only winner, 4.1% increase. 1850s sold for tomorrow are 3% out of the money. 1450 puts sold are 19% out. We've got Lululemon. It's a put spread with no shares to go along with it. Selling the 167.50. They're 2.4% in the money after today's 2.4% drop. MP Materials Corp down 5.4%. Calls sold for tomorrow, 61 and 65, 17 and 25% out. Then we've got 3 put spreads in a row with no shares. MSTR, Netflix, and Oracle. MSTR's puts are sold at 250. They're 5.4% in the money after a nearly 7% drop today. Netflix's puts at 1050 are 4.2% out after a small drop, and Oracle's $240 puts are 1.5% out of the money after a 2.5% drop. All 3, I should mention, are rolled already out till next week. Palantir down 6.8%. Calls sold at 192.50 expiring tomorrow are just about 10% out. Quantum Computing's calls are also about 10% out of the money, but they're already rolled the next week at 14.50, and they went down 7.3% today. Rigetti closing out, sold the shares, closed out all the options. They dropped 7.8%. Rocket Lab, and that closeout is going to end up being for a gain, because if you look at, we've had Rigetti for a decent amount of time. And so if you look at Rigetti over the past 6 months, so that closeout will be for a big gain. Rocket Lab down 12%. They rolled the remaining positions for this week. They do already have calls out till next week at 61 that are just about 23% out of the money, and $45 puts that are 9% out. Their puts purchased, protective puts for next week, are already in the money. New Scale Power was the big loser today, down 14.5%. Their calls are still in play for tomorrow at 45, 50, and 46. 40 and just about 42% out of the money. That's disgusting. SoFi down 9.6% today. Calls sold at 31 for next week are 14% out. Puts sold at 25 are just about 8% out. SoundHound down 9.5%. Their calls expiring tomorrow at 18 and 18.50 or 26 to 30% out of the money. Puts sold at 13 are still pretty far out too, but I think I said 13. And then $16 protective puts are way in the money, so you can see the closeout on this tomorrow is going to generate a ton of income. And Symbotic down 10%. Calls at 80 are still in play, 14% out. They rolled the further out of the money positions. And that is how we had a $161 million drop in the value of the shares within the fund. At the start of the day, assets under management, $2.2 billion, almost $2.3. Yesterday, people sold out of the fund. Outstanding shares dropped by 10,200,000 shares, down to 485,050,000. NAV at the start of the day, 472. Closing price, this says 456, but I think it's not done updating yet. We saw 454 on the Apple Finance app. Today was payday though, so you should have got your 7.88 cents per share. Average first call is now 16. I mean, everything in the fund could really take off tomorrow, and we'd be able to capture practically all of it. Looks like Lucid would get capped at 3%. But yeah, just in general, we could have like every single thing in the market go up 10% today, and we'd get all of it. So, but I don't see that coming. All right, next we have LFGY. As far as trades are concerned, no shares exchanged, so it's just options. And again, sometimes we get a bunch of smaller portions, smaller moves, and we don't sit and go through those line by line. I do include them in all the calculations, but just for talking purposes, we have a complete closeout and roll of our position of Bitmine Immersion, bringing in $123,000. Same thing, rolling till next week for CleanSpark, $144,000 credit. Coinbase brought in $164,000 on the roll to next week. GameStop brought in $78,000, closing out and rolling their options to next week. Robinhood, $164,000 credit on the roll to next week with their options. Hut 8 Corp closing out, paying 3 cents to close out their. How'd they do that? Boy, they made out great there. Somebody messed up, not on YieldMax's side, on the other side. So they only paid 3 cents to close out $55 calls, and they got to sell their $59 calls, $4 more out of the money for 7 cents. So they made twice as much, even though it was further out. So definitely got lucky on that one. Not that it makes a huge difference, but it'd be nice for you and I to be doing something like that. Bringing in close to $2, around $2 on the next sale, but having to use half of that to buy the other side of the spread. $186,000 credit for Hut. Mara brought in $180,000, roll into next week. MSTR brought in $169,000, same thing, roll into next week. NVIDIA, $88,000 credit, rolling our options to next week. And finally, PayPal, the last one for the day, roll into next week, $106,000 credit. All in all, $1.2 million credit on options trading. So they had one day where they didn't trade, and then 3 days in a row of making profits, expecting to make more again tomorrow, as they don't really have calls that are in the money that are going to have to be paid for to close out. When we switch over and look at the holdings, bullish was down 7.7% today, 12% out of the money on those $50 calls. They've already been rolled. Bitmine Immersion down almost 10%. Everything got rolled to next week. BitDeer, 3.89% drop. These calls are still in play and will get rolled tomorrow. They're at 23, 8% out of the money. $17,000 in cash. Not a lot on hand. $4.5 million in government obligation funds. Cypher, the big loser, down 12.1%. And these actually, that drop just barely brought their calls out of the money. So at $22, they're 1.3% out. So think about this. They started the week way in the money on Cypher on these sold calls. And you got people who would have been shouting and hollering to close those out and open up a new strike. So they would have paid a ton of money all for the stock to drop all week long. So instead, they stayed the course, and somehow these dropped, 20-30% to bring these calls back out of the money. Obviously, it's not good for us that it's dropping, but it's good that they did not panic and close these out on a Monday when going into a Friday they're going to end up out of the money. CleanSpark down 7%, everything rolled. Coinbase down 7.5%, everything rolled. Core Scientific down 5.5%. These still need to get rolled tomorrow. 2250s are 9.2% out of the money. Circle Internet Group down 11.5%. 118s are already rolled to next week, 18% out. iShares Ethereum Trust down 4%. Their $27 calls expiring tomorrow are 8% out of the money. Galaxy Digital down 3.3%. They've got $33 calls. They've already been rolled to next week. They're 8% out of the money. All right, then we've got GameStop, Robinhood, and Hut, all three in a row, down 2.9, 10.8, and 7.7%. Everything's been rolled the next week, so none of these options matter anymore. iBit, we've got our deep in the money calls here that represent shares that was part of a tax loss harvesting thing that they were doing. So they went down 2.8%. Their calls expire tomorrow at 58.50. They're 2% out of the money. Mara down 6.8%. Everything rolled. MBTX, the only thing they have now is this put debit spread, purchasing the 255, expiring the end of the year. It's really getting valuable. They dropped big time today. So that $7.5 million is going to probably turn closer to like 9 or 10 tomorrow based on 2 days ago where it was at a similar price. Mercado Libre down 7.5%. Their calls are already rolled to next week at 2,300, 8% out. Strategy down just about 7%. Everything was rolled. NU Holdings down 1.3%, bringing their $16 calls just barely out of the money, 0.33%. Again, good job on not panicking and closing them while they were in the money. They do expire tomorrow. NVIDIA got closed and rolled the next week after a 3.6% drop. Opera down 4.7%. Their calls are sold out to the middle, close to the end of the month, the 21st, at 15, 16, and 18. Really, the 16 and 18 are what matter. There's only 69 contracts at 15. Anywhere from 9 to 31% out of the money. PayPal down 2.6%. Everything got rolled. Riot Platforms down 8.5%. Their calls at 1950 have already been rolled to next week. They're 12.5% out of the money. SharpLink Gaming still needs to get closed tomorrow. Their $13 calls are 16% out of the money after a nearly 8% drop today. And Block was down 3.6%. Their $77 calls will get closed and rolled tomorrow. They're 8.5% out of the money. So that is how we had a $12.9 million drop in the value of the shares within the fund. Average call at this point is 12% out of the money. Assets under management at the start, $225 million. People bought into the fund yesterday on X day, so maybe taking advantage of a little bit of a price drop. We'll have to see if people really like this fund. It definitely got cheap today, so maybe we'll see another purchase when we go through tomorrow's information. 6,650,000 outstanding shares. NAV at the start, $33.96, closing around $32.44. And again, you should be getting 55.25 cents per share. You should have got it today, so long as you held the shares yesterday and purchased them prior to yesterday. All right, and finally, we have SLTY. SLTY, as far as their options trading, right? Trading wise, they didn't exchange any shares, so they're just rolling AMD, ASTS, Lemonade, Moderna, and SanDisk. Spending money, $28,119 on ASTS and AMD. Lemonade brought in $110, Moderna $12, and SanDisk $4,000 for an overall loss of $19,000. On the options trading, they've lost money every day this week trading options, other than no trades on Monday, but that is because the market is tanking. So if everything's going down and you were selling puts, then you're going to have to pay to close those out. Every day, though, well, not every day. They've been increasing in share value, other than yesterday when there was a little bit of a bounce. Some may be calling that a dead cat bounce, but up big today, 870,000 in value of shares. All right, we're not going through every little line item for these, so you're familiar at this point. There was no changes today, so you can see everything that they're shorting. It's also on the thumbnail, so I don't like to spend a ton of time on this one. The shame is the fund where they are shorting shares had more winners within it than the two positive outlook funds combined, right? They had AppLovin went up, Expedia went up, and IonQ went up, and Moderna went up. So they had four underlyings that went up, where ULTY and LFGY combined for a total of one. So their big gainer was IonQ, but that's a bad thing. If you shorted the shares, that's going to drop your value. The biggest loser was Centrus Energy. LEU is the stock ticker. They were down 15%. So as you can see, that helps the fund. But if you see, there's a lot of red on the bottoms. These are their sold puts, which is why with the market dropping by so much, they did not move up by very much, because if their sold puts are already in the money and they go deeper in the money, then they don't get to capture any of that movement in their share price, because the cost to close out those puts will grow right along with it. But so overall, $870,000 share value increase within the fund. Average put is practically at the money, 0.25% out. 20 million in assets under management at the start of the day, 550,000 shares, and a NAV of 37.69, closing up around 38.66. And you should have received 53.56 cents per share if you've got SLTY. Okay, that's all I've got for you. So I got a dad joke for you. Kind of proud of this one. Made my wife crack up when I told it, so prepare yourself. But thank you for watching. Appreciate all the likes, shares, comments, feedback, all the support. I definitely do appreciate it. And I can't believe I did this. I'm glad I caught it. I have it written down. Hopefully they're still with me here. So let's go find it real quick. We'll turn off the volume. We had somebody support the channel yesterday. And so it's very important for me to show thanks. I apologize for not catching it in the beginning of the video. I've got my little note written on my joke page so that I don't forget. But it was 05 Hoopa. There it is. 05 Hoopa gave a 199. It's in the chat, but I think that's considered a super sticker. Because usually super chat, it looks a little like it's got like words on it, and I can heart it. I couldn't heart that one, but 05 Hoopa, not his first time giving. He has given before to the channel, so thank you very much. And so here is your dad joke of the day. I called my homeowner's insurance to find out what would happen if someone stole my blanket in the middle of the night. They said I wouldn't be covered. You can use that one. I know you're going to tell that joke. All right. Thank you for watching. Good luck trading tomorrow. Don't forget, it's Friday coming up. So if you've got options open that are expiring tomorrow, you're going to want to close them or roll them, or at least pay attention to them to make sure that you're not caught off guard with assignment. Other than that, I'll catch you in the next video. Have a good night.